50 years ago, on a Sunday night, we huddled around the Zenith television set in my family's den, and we watched something magnificent, something no one would really thought would have ever happened. We saw man on the moon. It was so far away that it's almost incomprehensible that when you go 250,000 miles away from here, you could still see the footprint in the dirt. And now they're talking about even farther, going to kind of a brownish red speck out in the heavens, a place called Mars. That's a long, long way. But how far away is God? If you ask people, where is God? Here's what we do. He's up there. Now, you point up there all you want to, but how far is up there? The deists, of whom Franklin was one, believed that God had created our world like a clock, and they had gone off to a remote corner of the universe and let it wind itself down. How far away is God, anyway? Because the problem is we equate distance with absence. See, tonight there are several people who are not here because they're on vacation or somewhere else. And if you're not here, but you're there, you're absent here. That's how we think. That if you're not here, you're not here. So how far is God? Where can you go, the psalmist asks the question, where you cannot find God? That's a question of an everyday experience that we may not be aware of. The Bible contains pictures of people caught in the throes of humanity's struggles. And they all wonder the same thing. Where could I go where God is not? At the end of the book of Genesis, we meet a favored son, the favored son of Jacob. He has made most of his family irritated, to say the least. He's been boastful and proud. He has that special position. He doesn't have to work like the rest of the boys do. So the day comes where they sell him. And he's hooked together in a long human chain behind camels by the Midianites, headed for Egypt. And when he gets to Egypt, he finds a position, but he's soon accused by a flirtatious tart of rape. And he ends up in a prison cell. As he's in the prison cell, he does well. He helps people. He tries to maintain his composure, his sense of hope. But he helps this one man who probably doesn't deserve the help, a cupbearer. He tells him his dream. He gets him restored. And he says, remember. But then Genesis chapter 40 ends by saying, but he forgot him. How would you like to be in a prison cell and be forgotten? There must have come moments in Joseph's life where he said, where is God in this prison cell? Where is he? If he's real, why isn't he here? Why isn't he doing something? Now we read the rest of the story and we know there are other things going on in Joseph's life. But if you're caught in a circumstance like that, you ask the question, where could I go that God is not? Or another portrait. This is a fiery prophet who cares not for the audience he's going to preach to. They are not worthy. They are filthy. They belong to the enemy. Don't save them. Destroy them. And God says, I want you to go to Nineveh anyway and preach to them. And as he goes to Nineveh, he says, I'm not going to do that. So he boards a boat and he goes west to a place called Tarshish. We know it is Spain. That's where the map ends. There is no more map after Spain. It is literally the ends of the earth. And we're told in Jonah chapter 1 and verse 3, he sailed to flee from the Lord. Is there a place that you can run far enough that you can get away from God? It's the question of Jonah. But there's another picture. A picture that comes 150 years later or so of a great king, Nebuchadnezzar, who sweeps down the Fertile Crescent. He captures the great city of Lachish on his way. And then he comes to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, he besieges it and conquers it. And he takes with him the young men of the city and the country. And the men of Judah and men of Jerusalem didn't understand this after all. Why would God do this? We have his temple here. We have God in a box. He's going to protect us because we got God in the box. But 2 Kings chapter 24 gives the answer. The Lord was not willing to forgive them. And so over in Babylon, you meet these young men like Daniel and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. And was God able to go to Babylon? Now you see, all of those questions we answer, oh, yes, he could, because we know. But if you are caught in a foreign country, in a foreign prison cell, if you're trying to get away from God, where can you go that you could get away from God? That's where the psalmist tries to answer the question in Psalm 139. It is purported to be a psalm of David. We really don't know if David wrote it or not because the headings of the psalms are not as reliable and inspired as the rest of the text. David could have written it. But if you listen to what it says in Psalm 139, it asks that question, where could I go? The psalm opens with our relationship with God, or rather, his relationship with us. You have searched me, O Lord, you know me. Oh, that piercing word of knowledge, that intimate secret between husband and wife is the sense of that. And then he goes on to explain how well God knows us. When I sit, God knows when I'm sitting. When I get up, God knows when I get up. You can tell what I'm thinking without me being there. You know, when I lie down, you're familiar with all my ways. Even before a word forms on my lips, you know what I'm going to say. There are times that I wish if God knew that, he wouldn't have given me laryngitis, because what I was going to come out with was the worst possible thing. God knows us that well. I remember a few years ago, my wife had gone to North Carolina and was driving back with my daughter and her two big dogs. They were coming back to Texas. And we had made that trip a lot of times, and we would always stop at this truck stop outside of Knoxville on Interstate 40. And so I was well aware of it, and I decided, I wonder where they are right now. Well, there's an app for that. It's called Find My Friends. So I fired up Find My Friends. Boom, right there, truck stop. I know where it is. But then I watch it, and that dot moves, and that dot moves back, and that dot moves, and that dot moves back. And so I text my wife. I said, "You're walking the dogs right now, aren't you?" She wrote back and said, "How did you know?" Today when I do that, she says, "That's creepy." Maybe. But do you find it creepy that God knows you like that? That everything that we do, every thought that we have, every word that we say, every motion and intention, He is intimately aware of and thinks about. And He goes on to say, "You have hemmed me in behind and before." Oh, they knew that word because it was a warfare word. It meant to lay siege to a city. You want to destroy a city, you didn't throw all your armament at it. You just circled it and wouldn't let anybody in and out. After the food ran out, they'd all starve. And so you would encircle the city with an army. Once they were too weak to defend themselves, they'd give up. It happened to Jerusalem. It happened to Samaria. He said, God has laid siege to my life. He's encircled it. So when I turn to the left, God is there. When I turn to the right, God is there. When I look ahead, God is there. And behind me, God is there. And there's nowhere I can go where I cannot get away from God. He hems me in before and behind. God is always around you. And he goes on to say, and such knowledge, the knowledge you have of me is too wonderful for me. It's too lofty. It's too high. It can't be attained. It's beyond our grasp. I made a terrible mistake when I was a senior in high school. I signed up for calculus. I can barely spell calculus. I have never spent more time being confused in all my life, except for maybe the first year I was married. All men are confused when they get married. But I didn't know what was going on. I didn't understand it. He said, when you look at what we do, our pitiful little knowledge, no matter how important we think it is, God is creating the rising of the sun and the setting of the sun and the tides on schedule. All of those things God does, it is beyond our comprehension. That God can know us and know this world like that. It just doesn't compute for us. So the psalmist concludes by saying, so where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? Where can I go where God is not? And so he probes the question. It's kind of a thought experiment. He said, if I go to the heavens, you are there. If you get an airliner that's going at 36,000 feet, you can't see anything on the ground, just landscape. Try to pick out a person. And that's about as high as we can go in an airliner and let it fly still. No matter how high you go, God is there. In 1961, a Russian named Yuri Gagarin went into space. He's the first man to orbit the planet. He was a communist and he was an atheist. And so he came back boasting. He said, I was up there. I didn't see God. Because he wasn't looking. No matter how high you go, how far you go, there is nowhere in the heavens where God is not. You are there. And then he reverses it. He says, if I make my bed in the depths, you are there. There is a Dallas millionaire, his name is Victor Vescovo, who a few months ago paid a small fortune to go farther below the earth's surface than any man ever had, beyond 27,000 feet. As high as Mount Everest is on top, the oceans are beneath us. It's where fish don't have eyes because there is no light. The psalmist says, if you could go as far as you could go, where there was no light, where there was no life, where there was nothing, you are there. Think about what he has to say about that. No matter where we go in all this vast universe, God is always there. Where could I go? Because you can go everywhere and God is there. That has implications for us. Maybe we don't think about it often enough, but if God is wherever we are, it does change some things for us. For instance, if God is here, if there is nowhere to go to escape God, and you're engaged in sin, where can you go to escape Him? We have this interesting concept in our society that says what happens behind closed doors, those things that are not seen are not bad. They're just private. It's what David thought. 2 Samuel chapter 11, when he closed the door with Bathsheba in the room, nobody knew. It's what David did when he scrawled that last Hebrew character on the parchment before he handed it to Joab and told him what to do with his loyal servant Uriah at the front line. No one would know. No one would know about a pregnancy. No one would know about a death. No one would know about a murder. No one would know about a baby. No one would know. But God knew. He was there. He witnessed the whole sordid affair. And God wept. Lest we think we can engage in criminal behavior. And let me tell you what criminal behavior, it doesn't mean to break the law. It means to do something that's wrong and think you can get away with it. That's criminal behavior. If we think we can act on our own, whatever we want to do, and no one else on earth sees it, and we got away with it, we're wrong. Where can you go where God is not? Would that not change your sense of when you're about to do some things you shouldn't do? If you really believe that God was there watching you every step of the way, He knew your thoughts, He knew your intentions, He knew what you were going to say, would that not give you pause before you did it? But another implication is, well, what happens when you need to be forgiven? You know what the problem with sin is once you've done it? And shame comes in, we feel alone. Probably rightfully so. Have you never known anybody who's done something so bad that you didn't talk to them again, even though maybe they needed somebody to talk to them? We don't want to participate in sin, so we withdraw from people who need the forgiveness of God. And I think that God has left too. See, that's the second scene in David's story. He thought he got away with it. For 9 months, he got away with it. Until a criminal case is brought before him by Nathan the prophet of a theft of livestock. And David is so incensed, he's ready to take the guard out, cut the man's head off. When suddenly he says, well, David, you're the man. Then the crushing weight of shame of guilt falls upon his shoulders. And suddenly he needs something that's more than hiding. He needs forgiveness. The child is about to die. We don't know how long it was going to take, but a few days. And it could be in those days. David wrote the 51st Psalm, in which he writes, "Do not cast me from your presence, or take your Holy Spirit from me." The one great fear of David and us is if you reach a point of sin, is God going to keep showing up in your life? Where can you go where God cannot come to forgive you? The psalmist has the answer. Nowhere. And so when we struggle with our own sin, there's a place to turn. And when David says, ask for the forgiveness, God says, you have been forgiven. Now he has to pay a bitter price. But the weight of the sin is off of his shoulders. Where can you go where God is not? But when you're discouraged, where can you go where God is not? Discouragement is one of those things that we all experience from time to time. Some is worse, some is not. If you have a chronic illness, let's say, and you wonder if you're ever going to get well again, and every time you go to the doctor, you're on edge. You don't know what's going to be said, and you don't know whether you're going to live or die. You don't know if you're going to get well or not. You're not going to know whether you're going to know your kids or your grandkids. That's discouragement and fear. You may be caught in a marital situation in which it's like taking a wet dish rag and being wound out, wrung out, until there's nothing left of you because the tension is so high, and the frustration and the breaking of that covenant is so bad. And it's hard, if you've never done that, to know the feeling. There are times in life that come together that we think that God, He's somewhere, but He's not here. Where is God when I need Him? Where can I go to find God? The answer is, He's as close as you want Him to be. Peter, in 1 Peter chapter 5, said, cast your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. He's as close as you want Him to be. As close as you want to talk to Him about. As close as you want to unload on Him. Others may not understand, but let me tell you, God understands. God knows the feeling you're feeling. He sent His Son into a hostile world and watched Him be beaten and watched Him be executed, watched Him be spit at. None of us want our children to go through that. God did. And so, the question hangs. And we answer the question, where is God? And we go, He's up there. Would it not be better for us to say, where is God? And we circle our arms and say, He's here. He's close. He's with me every moment. Even when I don't see Him. And even when I don't feel Him. He's there. It's a faith that it comes with experience at times. But where can I go from the presence of the Lord? And the answer is nowhere. He's here. There's a woman whose name is Jennifer Rothschild. When Jennifer was 15 years old, she was diagnosed with a genetic condition that said you will be blind in a few years. Completely. She bought some time, it seemed like, and she got married, but within a few months after her wedding, her days went dark. Her husband was an Army sergeant. He was frustrated. He was broken. They didn't know what to do. They were depressed. They didn't know what to take care of. She had a job that she could still do, even in blindness. And so he would have to take her to work every day and help her into work and be around with her all the time. And then he'd have to help her back home. He'd have to cook the meals. He'd have to do all the things that wives would usually do for husbands. And he did it very patiently for months. The day came where he said, I've got to go back to work the right way. He said, they're beginning to tell me I've got to do that. He says, you can ride the bus. And she said, I can't ride the bus. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how many stairs there are on the bus. I don't know if I can find the stairs. I don't know if I can get off. He said, I can't do it. So for a few weeks, he rode the bus with her, got her where she went, then went on to work and came back. She gained her confidence. And as she gained her confidence, she could get on the bus and climb the stairs by herself. After about a week of that, the bus driver turned to her and said, you must be the luckiest woman in the world. She said, are you talking to me? I said, yes. He said, every time I pick you up in the morning, there's this man in this uniform, and he's smiling at you, watching you get on the bus, and waves and blows you a kiss when the doors close. And every day when I bring you home, there's this same man in this uniform who stands straight, salutes you. You must be the luckiest woman in the world to have someone that close to you. That's your story and my story. There's someone close to us. And if you're not close to God, guess who moved? And all you got to do is say, I want to come back. Tonight you could do that while we stand and sing.
Tenderly, Jesus.